The most dangerous moment in a gas leak isn't when you smell it, it's when you try to fix it. You walk into the kitchen late at night, expecting nothing more than a glass of water and a quiet apartment. But something feels wrong before you even reach the sink. The air carries a sharp chemical smell that doesn't belong in a normal room. At first it's faint, easy to question. Then it becomes unmistakable. Gas. Your brain moves faster than your reasoning. Ventilate the room, clear the air, and make it safer. That's what everyone believes. So you step toward the window and slide it open. Cold night air rushes inside, lifting the curtains and pushing through the kitchen in a slow, invisible wave. The smell shifts immediately, thinning in one corner, concentrating in another, spreading through the room in currents you can't see and don't control. What feels like the safest move just changed the chemistry of the air. Behind the refrigerator, a relay clicks as the compressor cycles on. Inside the switch, a microscopic spark jumps. You never see it. Because explosions rarely begin with fire. They begin when gas finds the exact oxygen it needs to burn. Most people think the smell is the danger. If the odor is strong, they assume the room is ready to explode. If the smell fades, they believe the danger is fading with it. But the smell isn't the threat. It's only a warning chemical added so humans can detect what their senses would normally miss. The real danger is invisible and brutally precise. Natural gas, mostly methane, only becomes explosive when it mixes with air inside a narrow band. Roughly 5 to 15% gas in the room's air. Too little gas and nothing ignites. Too much gas and there isn't enough oxygen to burn. But inside that thin window, the chemistry changes. The room stops behaving like air. It becomes fuel. Gas and oxygen lock together into a volatile cloud, waiting for a spark to run through it. And the cruel part is this. The smell can fade even as the mixture becomes more dangerous. The leak isn't what destroys the room. It's the moment the air quietly becomes the perfect mixture to explode. Gas leaks rarely fill a room evenly. At first, the gas gathers in pockets, drifting upward and spreading along ceilings, because methane is lighter than air. In many early leaks, the concentration near the source can actually be too high to ignite. The mixture is what firefighters call too rich, too much fuel, not enough oxygen. In that state, even a spark may not trigger an explosion. Then the window opens. Fresh air rushes in and the room begins to move. Invisible currents form between the opening, the walls, and the ceiling. Oxygen pushes into the space while gas spreads outward through convection. The dense pocket above the stove thins. The gas drifting along the ceiling mixes downward. Within seconds, the chemistry of the room begins to change. Concentration drops, oxygen rises, and somewhere inside that shifting cloud, the mixture slides directly into the flammable range, 5 to 15% methane in air. At that moment, the room stops being a leak. It becomes a fuel-air chamber. Now the explosion no longer needs a flame. A refrigerator relay clicking on. A thermostat switching. Even static electricity from clothing can release enough energy to ignite methane, less than a single millijoule. You never see the transition happen, but the moment fresh air entered the room, the clock quietly started. When people smell gas, the instinct is immediate. Open a window, let the air move, let the danger out. It feels like the safest decision in the room, but ventilation doesn't always remove the threat. Sometimes it reorganizes it. The moment a window opens, the pressure shifts. Air begins to move through the space in slow, invisible currents, pulling gas from the ceiling, dragging it through doorways, spreading it along walls and into rooms that never smelled it before. A leak that once sat quietly above the stove can suddenly exist everywhere. What began as a pocket becomes a cloud, and clouds travel. Gas doesn't care where the leak started. It moves with the air, slipping into hallways, bathrooms, and stairwells where no one expects it. The room may feel fresher, the smell may even fade, but the chemistry of the space has changed. Ventilation didn't remove the danger, it rearranged it. Sometimes the most dangerous moment in a gas leak is the moment the air starts moving. Once the smell spreads, curiosity takes over. People want to see better. They look for the leak, check appliances, scan the room for anything unusual. Instinct says, turn on the light. but inside every switch is a small mechanical separation of metal contacts. When the circuit opens or closes, electricity jumps the gap for a fraction of a second. A spark, tiny, invisible, normally meaningless. Inside a flammable gas mixture, it can be enough. A woman once noticed a gas smell while cooking and opened a window to clear the air. The odor drifted through the house. When she walked toward the basement stairs, she reached for the light switch at the top. The spark happened inside the plastic housing. The explosion didn't start near the stove. It started inside the wall, because gas explosions rarely begin where the leak is. They begin where the spark finally meets the mixture. Another dangerous assumption is that dilution always makes gas safer. In reality, leaks often begin with gas concentrations that are too dense to burn. Near the source, the air can contain so much methane that oxygen becomes limited. Fire cannot sustain itself in that environment. But when fresh air enters the space, the balance begins to shift. Gas thins. Oxygen rises, and somewhere in the room, the mixture passes through a narrow chemical window. Between 5 and 15% methane in air, the cloud becomes explosive. Too little fuel, nothing ignites. Too much fuel, combustion collapses. But inside that thin band, flame spreads through the mixture faster than the eye can follow. This is why a room can become more dangerous even as it begins to smell less intense. The odor fades, the chemistry sharpens, and the air quietly moves closer to ignition. Sometimes the moment the room feels safer is the moment it becomes most unstable. People imagine explosions beginning with obvious fire, a cigarette, a lighter, a stove burner. But most residential gas explosions are triggered by something far smaller. Modern homes are full of tiny electrical events happening all the time. Refrigerators cycle on. Thermostats click. Chargers, relays, and motors quietly open and close circuits. Each one can create a spark, not visible, not audible, just enough energy to ignite methane. In one apartment incident, a maintenance worker opened a balcony door after smelling gas, hoping the airflow would clear the room. The curtains lifted. The air moved. Somewhere in the heating system, a thermostat activated. The ignition occurred inside the furnace. The pressure wave traveled through the ductwork. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the explosion had already crossed the apartment. No flame, no warning. Just the invisible moment when a spark found the mixture already waiting in the air. Gas explosions rarely begin with fire. They begin with the spark you never knew happened. When something feels wrong in a room, the brain pushes you to act immediately. Open something, turn something on, fix the problem before it gets worse. That impulse is powerful because the human stress response is designed for visible threats: fire, movement, noise, danger you can see and confront. But gas leaks trigger the opposite kind of emergency. The threat is silent, invisible, and already mixed into the air around you. Under stress, adrenaline narrows attention and creates action bias, the urge to do something, anything, rather than pause. So, people ventilate, they flip lights, they start searching for the leak. Each action feels responsible, helpful, logical. But panic has a dangerous side effect. It convinces you the safest move is movement, when the safest move might actually be leaving the room untouched. When the mixture ignites, the change is instant. Flame doesn't creep through the room the way movies show it. It races through the gas-air cloud in milliseconds, expanding outward faster than a person can react. The heat surge is violent, but the real force comes from pressure. A burning gas expands rapidly, pushing outward in every direction at once. Windows shatter, doors blast open, walls fail under the sudden shock. By the time the explosion happens, the critical mistake is already behind you. It was the moment the air began to move, the moment the mixture crossed into ignition range, and the moment a spark, somewhere in the building, finally met it. Gas leaks feel simple: smell gas, open a window, clear the air. But the physics inside a room doesn't follow instinct. And the gas doesn't explode because you notice the smell. It explodes when oxygen quietly completes the mixture and a spark appears somewhere you never expected. That's the difference between reacting and understanding. In emergencies, instinct moves fast, physics moves faster, and physics never negotiates. The safest response isn't the one that feels right in the moment. It's the one that respects the mechanism already unfolding around you. If this changed the way you think about gas leaks, share it. And subscribe to Trust No Instinct, because the reflex that feels safest is often the one that puts you in danger.